Marathon is the latest extraction shooter game from Bungie, the makers of Halo and Destiny, joining the likes of Arc Raiders or Escape from Tarkov. And if you're someone who's entering into the genre for the very first time, or are simply looking for some helpful tips and advice, today I've got you covered with a complete beginner's guide on Marathon, including some super helpful tips and tricks to make your experience a hell of a lot smoother. So without further ado, let's begin. First of all, it's important to understand that Marathon is not like Arc Raiders. It is certainly a much more hardcore extraction shooter game, but it's also nowhere near as brutal as something like Escape from Tarkov. And all of this is to say that you are very unlikely to encounter friendly players and are much more encouraged to kill each other. PvP is the name of the game, and the quicker you come to terms with that, the better your experience will be. Next up, runner shells. Marathon is the first extraction shooter to feature playable characters with unique abilities as part of your loadout. And at launch, there will be 6, technically 7, shells available to play, and here is a quick breakdown on what each of them is about. Destroyer is your typical tank class featuring a riot barricade to block incoming fire, but also sports tactical sprint and air dash movement abilities to close the gap between enemies. Vandal is purely a movement focused shell featuring power slides, double jumps, and energy blasts. Recon is an intel character that can expertly track down enemy players with seeker drones, wall hacks, and interrogations. Assassin is, as the name suggests, the stealth class which can freely go invisible and shroud enemy vision using smoke devices. Triage is the medic featuring healing drones and an ultimate that can revive downed or even full kill teammates, and Thief is the loot goblin class that can see high value loot through walls, who also has a grappling hook. Technically, there is also a 7th shell, that being Rook, who only has one ability, letting him become undetectable from nearby enemy AI forces, and playing as him lets you load into trio matches as a solo that are also in progress. His whole identity is a scavenger who lurks around taking any loot he can from previous fights. Your runner shells also have the ability to slot cores and implants into them, where cores are items that directly affect your chosen shell's abilities or enhance their effects. Examples include a prestige core for Recon, which in Marathon speak is the highest gold tier, which upon downing an enemy player pings the rest of their team, a superior/purple core for Vandal, which allows your double jumps to lift you higher, or a prestige core for Destroyer, which allows damage absorbed by your riot barricade to be converted into shields. Implants, on the other hand, are items which provide additional effects for your build but aren't tied to a specific shell. Plus, they also increase or decrease the stats of your character, and yes, Marathon has quite an in-depth stat system, so let's cover a brief overview of that next. In Marathon, your character is going to have 10 different stats which go from 0 to 100 that affect how your build plays in any given situation. And I know this may seem like a lot, but thankfully not every stat is actually that important, so here are the ones you should be thinking about investing into with your implants that have true noticeable effects on gameplay. Heat capacity. Invest in this one because it increases the size of your heat meter, aka stamina bar, letting you sprint for longer or carry out other actions more frequently. Agility. This one increases your movement speed and jump height. Loot speed. This one increases how quickly items are unhidden when looting players or containers. Then prime and tactical recovery, which affect the cooldowns of your ultimate and secondary abilities respectively. The rest of these stats aren't quite as important and can be left alone. And another important thing to consider is that the base stats of each runner shell are all slightly different. Like for example, Vandal having the highest base heat capacity at 25 because every single one of her abilities consumes a sizable amount of heat. Moving along, with Marathon being a shooter game, there are of course plenty of weapons to choose from for your preferred style. You've got SMGs, pistols, assault rifles, railguns, snipers, marksman rifles, shotguns. Your options are very wide. And in Marathon, there are 5 ammo types which you ought to get familiar with, these being light rounds, vault batteries, heavy rounds, vault cells, and MIPS rounds. But don't worry, if you aren't sure what ammo type a particular weapon uses, in the bottom right of its icon shows a smaller icon of the ammo it requires. Also, there is no such thing as weapon rarity in Marathon like there is in Arc Raiders. Every weapon deals the same amount of damage regardless of whether it's a grey or a gold. But what determines the color rarity of the weapon is the attachments. And for the most part, it works on a majority system, where if say I'm using a shotgun that has 2 blue attachments and 1 green, it's now classed as a blue shotgun. But if my SMG has just 1 blue attachment and 2 greens, it's still a green SMG. So basically, if you ever find a purple or gold weapon out in the wild, it's because it will have either a purple or gold attachment on it. There's no such thing as higher rarities dealing increased damage. They all do the same amount, except it's the attachments that affect how the gun feels and performs. Also, with regards to weapon meta, it's still early days, but some of the best weapons in the game are the Waster shotgun, the long shot sniper rifle, the BR-33 volley rifle, and the the Bully SMG. Okay, after you've selected your shell and weapons, once you're actually in a run, one of the more frequent threats you'll encounter are the UESC, the main AI adversaries that are restricted solely to points of interest. Think of them as security guards that need to be taken out. Unlike the Arc robots in Arc Raiders, the UESC are more of a side threat rather than the main big bads, but they can still deal plenty of damage to you and cannot be ignored if aggroed. And as a team, it's a pretty safe bet to take care of them. But as we'll come to discuss later, if you're playing solo, I highly recommend not engaging with the UESC at all. You'll quickly burn through all of your ammo and heals and also make a ton of noise attracting any nearby players. Seriously, do not fight them if you're planning on going in solo. At times, there are also certain UESC world bosses that spawn, indicated on the map by the big red dots, and killing these usually does give some pretty good loot, so if you're in a team and the coast is clear, definitely try and take them down. You've probably heard it a million times when it comes to these types of games, but I'll say it again, audio in Marathon is incredibly important. There are a lot of useful hints you can get from audio cues that can either make or break your runs, as well as environmental signs that can point to certain bits of information. Things like birds flying into the sky mean players are near that location because they scared them off. The UESC will always make a high-pitched screech whenever they notice a player, and if you know for a fact it wasn't you, well then you know another player is nearby. So pay close attention to the sounds around you and I promise you'll win more fights. Once you're done with a match, you can extract with all of your loot, and like most extraction shooters, you typically have to wait around 60 seconds after activating the extract, and in Marathon there is also a special type of extract called a guarded exfil that upon activation will spawn a small group of UESC, including a tanky commander, who by the way can sometimes drop good loot, so if you're feeling confident, definitely go for these when you can. After you make it out alive, the main out-of-run progression system comes in the form of the factions, and at launch there are 6 of them: Cyberacme, New Caloric, Traxxas, Mida, Arachne, and Sekiguchi. If you're coming from something like Arc Raiders, you can picture the faction system as essentially your skill tree and your workbenches combined, because leveling up factions grants you access to certain upgrades which can do things like permanently upgrade your character's stats, unlock the ability to buy specific higher rarity items, or directly upgrade moment-to-moment gameplay actions like map scans. And here is a quick overview of what each faction is all about. Cyberacme mainly deals with vault space increases, upgrading your heat capacity and generation, as well as general upgrades to your base stats. New Caloric is all about heals and shields, where if you level them up enough, you'll eventually be able to purchase purple shields from their section in the Armory. Traxxas is mostly weapon related, with them eventually allowing you to buy a host of weapon attachments from the Armory. Mida is centered around explosives and other items that fill the equipment slot. Arachne is centered around heavy weapons like machine guns and railguns, as well as improving your melee damage and offering melee related items for melee focused builds. And finally, Sekiguchi is all about runner cores and implants, letting you buy up to blue quality of both from the store, as well as offering permanent upgrades to your ability cooldowns. In my opinion, the 3 most important factions to level up early will be Cyberacme, New Caloric, and Sekiguchi, with the rest being more specialized picks depending on the weapons or playstyles you like to incorporate. I briefly mentioned it in the last section, but the Armory is going to be the main way you buy items with credits in this game. And unlike Arc Raiders, there is no crafting system in Marathon, and instead all of the items you can quote make are just outright bought with credits from the Armory. The quote crafting side of things comes with unlocking the relevant faction upgrades that allow the purchase of said items from the Armory in the first place. So if you unlock the blue shield from New Caloric, provided you have enough money, you can just outright buy them. In a similar vein, there's also no recycling feature, and dismantling items dissolves them into their credit value. It's literally all just money after your faction upgrades are done. The factions are also going to be the main way you obtain free kits, otherwise known as zero risk loadouts for your runs, and usually there are several on offer. One that is always free, and then a couple others that cost credits, which as a result start you off with better gear. And if you've never played extraction shooters before, free kits are a great way to jump in on the action without needing to think about making a loadout beforehand, or allow you to stand a fighting chance and recover your lost loot if you've had a particularly bad day. Some of my best runs from previous play sessions have come from free kits where we caught a stacked team totally off guard, so don't underestimate them and be sure to lose that gear fear. Okay, in this section I want to discuss some tips for solo players, because even though I wholeheartedly believe Marathon is best played as a full trio and you will ultimately have more success as a trio, I understand not everyone has people to party up with, so solo players, don't worry, I got you. First of all, when playing solo, in order to win and get out, you need to understand that ratting is the best way to do this. And by ratting, I mean playing slow, carefully listening out for audio cues like aggroed UESC, shooting, or footsteps, while also making as little noise as possible yourself. This can include bot walking around the map with your gun out, taking care not to activate nearby turrets or scare away birds. And also, another huge tip I can give is that when you do eventually see a player, before you take the shot, make sure you can absolutely kill them without prolonging the fight. You need to have the trigger discipline to select just the right moment to strike and quickly dispatch players, because if you don't, A, they might get away and come for revenge later, or B, you create so much noise that you get unexpectedly third-partied and have to start again. Bottom line, if you're playing solo, take things slow, listen carefully, and don't get greedy. And by far the best runner shell to take into solos is going to be Assassin. The utility you get from invisibility is just too good to pass up, and don't forget you can catch someone completely off guard with it. And in games like these, that usually means you'll win the fight every time. As with most extraction shooters, there are a plethora of resources to be found in the game, and you might be finding yourself confused on which ones to keep or leave behind and what they all mean. So here's what you need to know. First of all, any resource that has a satchel icon next to it means it is a valuable, and upon successful extraction will be auto-sold for credits. So if you're down on money, then definitely grab as many of these as you can. Then there's also this square with an X in the middle looking icon that represents resources you need for faction upgrades or bartering in the Armory. And over time, you'll get used to which ones you need to keep or not, but a general rule of thumb is that if any resource name starts with unstable, keep it, which includes unstable diodes, unstable biomass, unstable gunmetal. They are all required for some super important early upgrades, so keep a sharp lookout for them. Sparkleaf is another great resource to hold a bunch of because they exchange 1-to-1 for patch kits, which are your base health meds, which is really nice. And you can also just find credits in looted containers, so again, another source of money. Now for just a few general tips. First of all, shields in this game do act as overhealth and are not a source of damage resistance like in Arc Raiders. And when using healing consumables like shield charges and patch kits, they don't restore a solid chunk of their respective bar, but instead slowly begin regenerating them. The difference being that higher rarities recharge your shields and health a hell of a lot faster. And there's also an item called a Panacea kit, which is effectively the Phoenix kit from Apex Legends, where it recharges both your health and shields very quickly. Next up, managing your heat meter is very important, and aside from obtaining faction upgrades which increase your heat capacity or heat generated, best practice when rotating between POIs is to run with your knife out since it generates the least amount of heat and is faster, as well as intermittently jumping to reduce build-up further, since there's no jump fatigue in Marathon. Furthermore, whenever you are walking across water or it is raining, your heat meter will have this special blue outline surrounding it, indicating that less is being generated. So whenever you can, run across water or through the rain. And also, other than standing completely still, crouch walking is the second fastest way to remove excess heat, so make sure you're doing this if nearing full. And finally, don't overheat ever if you can help it. It takes far too long for your heat to cool down from an overheat, and it basically makes you a sitting duck. Please avoid. Lastly, Marathon does quite a good job of letting you know when you actually get a knock or elimination, because there is an active kill feed for you and your squad on the left-hand side. No need to second guess if you got a down or not, the game simply just tells you. And the feedback for cracking someone's shield is also shown by a cracked shield icon next to your reticle. Finally, the last tip I can give you as a beginner is to lose your gear fear. Yes, maybe if you're down on your luck, be a little more careful about what you choose to bring in so you don't end up with nothing, but the more you play, the more of a safety net you'll create for yourself, and just remember there's always more loot out there. Don't be afraid to bring in that blue shield, the purple backpack, or the gold attachment weapon, because simply holding your best items forever is nowhere near as fun as actually using them. So I hope with what I've shown you here today, you can start winning more games and building out your account. And if you enjoyed today's content and want to see more videos just like this, then be sure to subscribe, as I'm planning on releasing plenty more helpful Marathon guides and breakdowns in the immediate future. Also, drop a comment down below with any helpful advice you think players ought to know, which we didn't cover here today. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.